Hi, I'm Mick. Today I'm interviewing Florigenix, who's an artist most prevalent and known on Instagram. I find that posting and finding art on Instagram can be a contrasting experience, but with all of its faults, there's currently no better platform for musicians and sound artists to display work for others to see. Unlike, say, YouTube, it has a more diverse audience, which tends to touch people outside of your own creative circles. I have very much a love-hate relationship with it. I've made meaningful connections with people through it, and I've since worked with several artists who post there. At the same time though, it can feel a bit like a creativity vampire, sucking up the blood of inspiration to drive its product pushing and engagement algorithms. I often find myself caught in a dark chamber of endless reels, staring blankly at my screen like a moth to a flame. Through this lens, the world can sometimes feel a bit homogenized and grey. Also, putting my music up there feels kind of pointless, as I can't muster the effort to spend time making the platform work for me. And after seeing my 200th cute dog video for the week, I'm often tempted to uninstall it. Occasionally though, I find stuff that truly inspires me. And one such find is Nicholas, aka Florigenix. He posts some of the best presented music work on the platform, and it's all through his unique lifestyle, which is exploring the wilds of rural Australia in a van, #Vanlife. His lifestyle brings with it a sort of creative purity and focus. By living frugally, he's able to dedicate time to experiment through both sound and video. His work doesn't really sit still. It can be ambient, it can be techno, avant-garde, and everything in between. It's often extremely polished, while other times it can be raw and playful. His music demands deep listening, which is a tough ask in today's fast food style music industry, especially on a social network like Instagram. Cleverly though, Nicholas uses striking visuals to encourage his audience to stop and take time to listen. He also uses Instagram's platform structure to his advantage, where he posts up to 10 one-minute videos on each post, essentially making every post a sort of micro EP. Today we talk about a few things: process, lifestyle, concepts, artistic intents, and also stuff like building confidence. I found it a really inspiring chat, and I hope you enjoy it. Cheers. On Instagram, you #Vanlife. What does that mean?
Well, there's quite a few people doing it in Australia. I mean, I guess it's a worldwide thing, but it's just choosing to live in a vehicle, I guess. Actually, you can see is sort of sand dunes in the background.
Oh wow.
I guess that's kind of like similar to what a lot of people have done in history. You know, people who've lived on the road, like it's kind of just an extension of that. But yeah, it's pretty good in Australia because you're free to drive it anywhere pretty much. You're not having to worry about crossing borders and all of that sort of stuff.
Is it solar powered?
I've got a solar power in the day, and then while I'm driving, that'll also charge the battery.
Yeah.
The battery is not a big battery, so I can't do a lot at night. I charge my devices in the day, and yeah, sort of keep an eye on the sun. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. So what is day job for you?
Well, I'm pretty much full time. I basically just do my Instagram. I don't need a lot to survive, with this lifestyle. So
Yeah.
it suits me, but it's not super empowering. So of course the Instagram is something that I'm focused on. It is work. Like I'm doing work, and I'm loving the work that I'm doing. It's just it doesn't exactly bring in much income at the moment, but I'm working on that.
For sure, yeah. I mean, like you're posting quite a lot, and the presentation is just so amazing. It looks like
Oh, thank you.
it looks like every post takes a lot of effort to get in there, but then also imagine that you've got a process where you can set stuff up and kind of go.
Yeah, it's sort of, I wouldn't be able to do it if I didn't have a good workflow. When I first started using Instagram a few years ago, it was pretty much the beginning of 2020, when I started using it for my music.
Yeah.
And that was just when COVID was sort of hitting, and so everyone started going online, and it was like quite a good time to start Instagram posting, because a lot of people were doing things on Instagram, and I was just using my phone to record everything, and then I just started realizing I've got a camera, and why not just start doing it properly.
How did you get into nature photography or videography?
Well, my dad has always been a photographer. He's always loved photography, so I've always had cameras. I learned how to use a SLR camera pretty young, but only recently have I started using video quite as much. Probably because nowadays your cameras have video. Now I've got a mirrorless camera, and it's like just as good at video as it is for photography. And
Is the filming and the music part of the same session, or is it kind of you might film one day and then work on the music the next?
definitely a bit of both. The ones where you see me actually performing, like the sound and then the music is live with that recording. So
Yeah.
I just do single take like videos. I just set up my camera and have the sound coming directly from the synthesizer into my camera, and then just sort of record for a minute and just play it, jam around, and record for a minute and just get little 1 minute snippets, and then I go through them after and pick little bits,
Yeah.
and then throughout the week and that would have been taking images and photography and sounds, but usually just video with sound in nature. So I have a nice mic on the camera, and just that. So the field sound element of it is also done directly into the camera usually as well, and then I'll just bring both of those two videos into Final Cut Pro, and I'll just layer them together basically. Yeah.
Like whenever I see your posts, I just kind of think, "Fuck, why aren't they making music?" Because I think there's a bit of an overlap between the way that we both make music, but your kind of version of that is kind of like a level up from what I'm doing. So it's entirely my assumption, but it seems like you don't really focus on multi-tracking, that sort of thing. It's more about just kind of capturing a thing in the moment, just a stereo out. That's a lot about how I work. There's not a huge amount of breadth and of scope that you can do with your compositions when it's kind of in one go. Do you ever find like a tension between musical ambition versus what you can do in the moment?
Well, I quite like, at this point again in my life, I quite like sort of quite minimal music. I'm quite happy to sort of be making music that doesn't require a whole lot of tracking, but that's just for the Instagram posts mostly. So when I'm making albums, I'll drag those stereo files into Logic, and then I'll start layering over them. So they'll be the basis, and then I'll start to add way more to it. It's sort of just it's just me learning about my instrument. It's just me practicing and jamming, and and I've sort of, I guess I've got it down to a bit of an art, but for me it's still, I'm just learning and experimenting most of the time. So, and sometimes it comes out pretty much like a song, sometimes it's just a texture or just
I love how you do like multiple every post has got multiple little ideas, like it's different like kind of explorations of the same thing, the same patch, or the same idea. It's really cool.
Often the same patch. It's usually the same patch, and then it will be either sort of even quite similar vibe, or I might just change it up quite a lot but use the same patch. Just like erase my sequencer, all of the sequences, and then but leave it all as it is, and then just make a new.
It's a really different way of hearing a musical idea, instead of like this kind of like formed 5-6 minute piece. It's almost non-linear. You can kind of dart in and out of like where your mind is going as you're making it. It's really interesting.
Thanks. I like that. It's good to hear the feedback about this particular way of presenting work, because it's so new, right? I mean,
for sure.
We've never had this sort of opportunity to be presenting music and video in this format, and in particular what I do love is the sort of up to 10 little snippets, and it's like a little mini album, and you can sort of take people on a little journey, but like you say, it's easy to flick back and forth as well. So
why has Modular become your kind of instrument?
I've had a journey with music. I've come from a fairly musical family, and I've had different instruments growing up. I had always had pianos in the house, and so and I learned a little bit of keyboard and stuff back in primary school. And then when I got to high school, there's only a limited space for piano players, so and I wasn't really technically advanced. So I didn't get into piano, so they chucked me into drums. Probably had a choice, but I played the drums and learnt the drums all the way through high school, and then, and played drums in bands for many years after that. But I kind of just got into synthesizers, like alongside playing in bands with drums.
Mm.
And then, yeah, like only sort of 3 or 4 years ago, I'd already gathered quite a few hardware synthesizers. I had quite a collection. Not quite a collect, but I had, I don't know, 10 or something like that.
Yeah.
Drum machines and synthesizers, which I'd stuck on board, and I was carrying a big board. When I went to play gigs, I'd drag this big board that I'd sort of velcroed all my drum machines on.
Okay,
it was basically
right, yeah.
like a modular synth, but just sort of like that, a custom version of it,
Sure.
because I just didn't like setting things up every time and plugging everything in every time if I
Yeah.
played music. So I like to be able to move it around. And then, so I just slowly got smaller and smaller. And then I started realizing that modular synths were actually more affordable than they used to be. There was more variety in what I could buy.
Yeah.
It wasn't just purely abstract synthesis stuff. It was like drum machines, sequences, things like things that I'd already knew about how to work with. And so I sort of had a bit of both. I had like a BeatStep Pro and a keyboard and a few other drum machines and a little rack, and then it just slowly became more and more modular. Then I started building my own cases to hold them exactly the way I want it, and so it just became like just a slow evolution, because they're so compact, and I like to have it compact. I like to be able to move it around, and
Sure, yeah.
yeah.
How come you work in hardware versus just on a laptop?
Yeah, I've done it. I've played with software a lot, and I don't know. There's some sort of cleanliness about it that I just like to have it a bit more raw. I just like the raw feel of it. There's no doubt that I can hear the difference in the sound. Not to say you can't do amazing things with computers. That's for sure.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, that's a whole nother level. But yeah, I also love the interactivity. I love the hands-on thing. Like we were saying before, I'm sort of the generation where I played with toys and played with things, hands-on as well. So there was something about playing with these devices, and plugging things in and building them,
For me, it's certainly a kind of a sense of play with it, which is I like, because I feel like if you create a kind of more playful environment, you kind of end up exploring different spaces than you might in a more kind of clinical or worky kind of environment.
Yes, that's right.
So like at work, we've managed to buy a few little bits for the sound designers, and it's just almost inevitable that, like, versus using, I don't know, a VST like Serum or something, when you're trying to create something synthetic, when you're like, you've got all these kind of knobs and jacks, like, what does that do?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's a cool sound, I'll record that,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's just exploration.
And you're always surprised. Yeah, it's exploration, and I know that there's things like VCV and these sort of brilliant software that basically emulates, but I don't know, it is something really nice to not be using, just to be using your hands and plugging things in, and it's play. And I think play is, I mean, that's a whole topic. Like, I think play is really important for adults as well, and I think for anyone who really wants to sort of get the most out of their productivity and their mind, I think you've got to have play somewhere in your life.
Yeah.
And if you can incorporate it with your work, all the better. Because play is experimenting. Experimenting is adult word for play. Play is...
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it is.
What would you say your musical influences are? Do they go back quite a while, or is it kind of a more modern touch?
That's a big one. Yeah, I mean, I'll try to be brief, but I basically got into rock and roll in 50s rock and roll when I was quite young. My dad had, played lots of that sort of stuff, so that was my favourite for a while when I was young.
Sure, right.
My older sister had quite a bit of like acid jazz and like funk and that sort of stuff, and Red Hot Chili Peppers and stuff like that. And then it just started expanding. Like my dad gave me some records that he had, and then his friend gave me some records of like free jazz and like and Noise Concrete from like the 60s, and that just opened my mind up to a lot of stuff. Once I started realizing that I was pretty open to lots of different sort of music, I just followed. And my friend had my friend who I played music in bands with for many years in my 20s, he was just a record collector, and he had tons of stuff, and he was always introducing me to things. And so ambient music was always sort of around. And then when I started feeling confident that I could make ambient music the way that I wanted to, then I started to really, and that was especially during over the last 3 or 4 years with being on Instagram, just being inspired actually by like everyone else who's been experimenting with their stuff and playing, and then I'm just inspired by Instagram mostly. Like, I mean, that's where I get a lot of my inspiration from, just seeing other people just like yourself or all of us doing these things, and that's inspiring now.
I always used to think that ambient music was a real niche until I got onto Instagram.
Crazy, isn't it?
It's interesting.
And but also I guess there's that phenomena where I mean, it's enhanced by the algorithms that we expose to things that we like. So we start to like, it's like me, my feed is full of music that I like, so I start thinking that the world is full of this, but really we are probably in a bit of a niche. Do you know what I mean? It's it still is a bit of a niche, but it's definitely a big it's a worldwide niche that is a lot bigger than you kind of think. And I think that just the fact that we're all connecting around the world just means that these smaller things that in our own home city we might be one of a handful of people liking it. If you add all of those handfuls together, then it becomes
a scene, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So in your recent posts, like, you've kind of seemed to explore a couple of new avenues. One of them's vocals. You've done a lot of vocal stuff recently, and the other one is kind of like physical performance with it, like using movement, kind of dance and that sort of thing. So the vocal stuff, like, what's your thoughts behind that? Because sometimes when I listen to it, I feel like it sounds almost like it's kind of ancient, or maybe kind of like old, I don't know, 15th century kind of religious kind of choral stuff,
Gregorian chants or something.
That kind of stuff.
I've always hummed. I've always just made sounds with my voice. I've always enjoyed, like, just every day sort of whistling and humming and singing and whatnot. And I started to learn how to do overtone singing and that sort of thing.
Oh, cool.
At some point. And even just albums like Bjork's one where it was like all voice, for example, that album where she did where it was like
Modular, I think,
all voice. Modular, yeah. Not that I've necessarily listened to it too much. I've listened to it a few times, but just the concept of that was brilliant. That was very influential on me. The idea that she was making an album purely with voice, and I'd started getting into some really interesting vocalists at one point. The one particular vocalist. I've been meaning to do a post just purely to honor this guy.
Right.
His name is, I think it's like Gedalia Tazatzes or something. Gedalia Tazatzes. It's like a Spanish name, and he was doing things in the 70s. I think he's still alive, with tape and making loops, vocal loops, and and chanting over the top, and not chanting, but just expressing in real interesting ways, like really
Yeah,
weird
yeah,
experimental vocals.
yeah.
And I started incorporating vocals just as a layer. I did one performance in my hometown where I actually did vocals. I was up there with a mic. And then when I got onto Instagram, it was more like exploring my synthesizers. Wasn't really thinking about that so much.
Mm.
But then I'm just starting to like bring it in. Like the thing was already, it was already sort of happening,
Yeah.
and now I'm just sort of like getting the confidence to start to bring it in more,
Sure, sure.
and also having the synthesizers working in a way that really is inspiring to use voice with. You know, sort of some of the effects and the samplers and things, you know, with voice is really interesting. So that has further inspired me, I guess.
Thinking about the kind of the more movement stuff, the dance stuff. Would you say that like your lifestyle of kind of going out into the sticks at months at a time kind of
Yeah,
frees you up
yeah,
creatively in a way that, you know, because it seems quite solitary, so there's like you're not kind of looking over your shoulder of like, you know.
absolutely. No, it has to be for me at the moment. I
Yeah,
haven't got the confidence to do. I haven't broken the barrier of sort of doing movement and dance type stuff as a performance. You know,
yeah,
as I say, I've worked with dancers and I've worked with performance, and I've always loved that thing of doing sound and working with dancers. But I, partly due to my own self development, have enjoy including movement in my day to day life, and
mm,
I guess trying to sort of bridge and incorporate some other aspects of my lifestyle and life into my music. It just makes sense to me. It feels natural, and it also feels good to sort of be breaking down some of those insecurities and fears that, you know,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that can hold me back in life. So I mean, it's great to sort of do it onto camera, and then it's like, oh yeah, that's sort of helping me just get more confident in general, I think.
There's one that you got pinned right now where it's the tall grass and you're behind it.
Yeah,
It's quite nicely put together. That.
yeah, it's a situation there, and I thought it was nice lighting, and I was just recording myself, just to see. Again, wasn't necessarily going to post it, didn't have an
Yeah,
idea. I
sure.
just thought
Yeah,
I'm going to record it, see what it looks like on camera. You know, once I bring it back onto the laptop and have a look at it. And when I was doing that experiment, and I saw that tuft of grass there, and I thought that looked nice if I'm sort of focused on that and then be in the background. And sort of, I always loved depth of field and playing with that with a camera, and I was like, oh, well, that might look like. And then I've been trying that a little bit. It also takes away the sort of thing about like the focus is on me and my skin and everything very visceral when you're sort of just in the background, and it's sort of like you're a figure and you can be moving and you can be doing things amongst nature, but actually nature is the thing in focus, you know. And it's,
yeah,
I don't know, I
sure.
quite enjoy that play as well. I did one just the other day that was like, the top video was this lizard moving around on this tree, and then I was sort of crawling around like a lizard and just playing with being these different animals just for fun, you know, just being like, oh, that'll make an interesting film because I'm like moving in a different way, so it gives me
Yeah,
different
yeah,
ways of moving and thinking in those ways. And then of course it sort of brings on like, what sort of music would I like to do for that? So sometimes the video kind of element does happen first, and then I'm like, make some music for the video.
sure.
But sometimes I've just picking bits of jams and just sticking them together and see what works.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It seems like nature's a huge influence in your work. Like, is that
Yeah.
why you go out, you know, in the van and that sort of thing, just to be connected to nature? Do you feel like
Yeah. Love.
you can better make music in that environment versus back home, sort of thing?
Interesting question. I think I wouldn't say better make music, because there's definitely something good about having all your stuff set up, you know, ready to roll in the studio. Like, I definitely like sort of that as well, and in a way sort of miss having everything kind of spread out with a nice space. You know, at the moment I'm quite compact in the van, and there's something a bit pokey about like this van and the way it's all set up. It wasn't necessarily designed to work in so much, you know.
Sure, right.
But I've managed to kind of get it pretty good. But they're on my bed, you know what I mean? Like, I'm literally sleeping on where my synthesizers are. But as you know, that I also bring them out and put them
Yeah,
on the ground, and you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
But when I want to think about, you know, what a shot is going to make a nice video, then I'll be like sort of thinking, oh, where's a nice place to do a footage, and then I might set up a patch in the van, and then I'll just bring the whole synth over there and just plonk it down and then start playing with it. And it's like a lot easier. I'm not sort of sitting out there for hours sort of patching and all of that. Already kind of half planned in a way. I think in general for people, I think the environment that you're in, the working environment you're in, and your just general lifestyle and you know the spaces that you inhabit, they have an impact on what sort of music you want to be making, the moods you're in, and all of that. And for me, I have found myself really being more attracted to sort of getting more into nature. For me, also does give me a lot of interesting material for the camera. You know, there's that side of it. But really, I just enjoy being out in nature. You know, I'm quite sensitive in many ways, and the city. I've just sort of recognised that cities don't suit me so well. I actually just prefer to be out of cities more, you know, and even if it's just living in the country, for example, like an hour away from the city, it doesn't have to be fully remote, but if I've got the van, then remote is really, really cool, and Australia's got lots of remote places, so
When you're planning a trip, is it places that you've always known that you've wanted to go visit, or are you kind of like just exploring new zones sort of thing?
A bit of both. Like this whole coast I haven't been too much, and the west of Australia, and I did quite a bit of inland Western Australia too, and I just hadn't been here. So because of the weather, I knew that it was getting cooler and I wanted to get up into the warm weather, so I just decided to go you know, up north for winter, and now I'm sort of going to start going, because it's already getting like 35 degrees every day, and now it's only the beginning of spring, and it's like it's going to get really hot here, so I'm going to start going south. But when I'm living back, you know, in South Australia, there's some places that I go to quite regularly. You know, if I want to just sort of get away for a few days, I've got campsites and places that I know I can go to, and that I, you know, just like to go to.
Do you feel like your kind of your videos and posts and field recordings, is that in a way to kind of document, you know, where you are?
I like the idea of the documentation side of it. I think, you know, I like the idea of artifacts and sort of legacy, and just sort of leaving marks on the world, and just sort of leaving a trace, you know, of respectfully, obviously, but you know, kind of, I like the idea of art or things that we create lasting, you know, beyond our own lives and things like that. I sort of enjoy, I think about that a bit, but I haven't really associated it with videos and Instagram posts because of the nature of digital media. I haven't really thought of them in that way, because I don't trust that any of it's going to last, you know. I've lost enough stuff I've lost enough shit in my life.
It does feel kind of transient, doesn't it? Like
it does feel a bit transient, which is interesting. But my paintings and things that I might make, you know, with physical material, I like the idea that it's going to be sort of around for a while. And because just recently I took down, like I had pretty much every post. I just had them all available. So if you wanted to, you could scroll and scroll and scroll, and I had hundreds of posts, and you could just go down and look through them like at your own leisure. But because of Instagram, the way it's, you know, I think stupidly limited in the way that you can order and what you see. I mean, you really only got your timeline. You can only really look at people's page in one way. You can't search, you can't get to the bottom, you can't do anything. You've just got to scroll, and it actually takes you like forever to get down if you want to just get down to some of the old stuff. So I actually recently archived a whole bunch, like most of my stuff, and I brought it down to about 100 posts.
Okay.
Just so that people can sort of quickly scroll through a big range of my stuff. Just because I thought, like,
you're curating it a bit.
Curated. I've curated it more, and I like that because, you know, I know that when I'm looking at something, I do like to just sort of be able to scroll through and get a bit of variety. If I'm checking somebody's workout, and so I've just sort of chosen things that I think show a bit of a variety of what I've been doing over the last few years.
Yeah, a bit of range. You said you liked prog rock was an influence. Like a lot of prog rock
Yeah,
stuff is kind of
yeah,
concepts, like kind of concept albums, that sort of thing. Do you ever
yeah,
think in that way?
yeah, yeah,
Is concept
for
part of your
sure.
thing?
Yeah, for sure. Particularly with albums, but I mean, with every post, I mean, you might notice that just about every post I've got little things
Yeah,
going on. There's like I've got
yeah,
the location, I can play with the location as a thing. I've got title of the track,
mm.
I've got hashtags, I've got the content of the actual, the written
Like yeah, the
stuff,
text, yeah,
and then I've got the actual sound and the image. So there's all these little factors that you can play with conceptually, and I like to sort of build a bit of an overall sort of vibe with the post, sort of some sort of idea, some sort of feeling, some sort of
mm.
concept.
Yeah,
I don't usually make an intention with a post and think, oh, I'm going to
yeah,
make music that suits this and make the thing.
yeah,
It's more like,
yeah,
oh yeah, this music and this and that, I'll just call it this and let's just
yeah.
play with that
Things
idea
just
and
kind
sort
of
of,
fall
you
together.
know, they sort of fall together in the
Yeah,
moment of posting. It's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And then to me, it's almost like it's great because it's almost like, oh yeah, now I get it. Like this is what I've been working with, and that's the concept, and it just sort of comes out.
mm.
Because music isn't purely conceptual, right? I mean, it's
Yeah,
a sort of
for sure. Yeah,
there's
yeah, yeah,
feelings, there's
yeah,
there's sensory. It's a sensory thing, so it's going to be related to that as well. Sort of
yeah,
being immersed in an environment, and the environments that I want to create, and the whole scene that I want to sort of create. I think some of the prog rock and some of those guys doing those, sometimes I feel that they were very focused with their concept, and they have a very particular type of thing coming through. But then you never really know, do you? Because that's what it can appear as when
mm.
you're looking at this album art and all of that. But it could be like what I'm doing, just sort of quite throwing things together and it all just lands in this kind of interesting
Yeah.
way. And so you never really know.
It's almost like there's a genre concept with some of the, like there's kind of subgenres within prog rock because you got some of it which is almost like Lord of the Rings fantasy. You know what I mean? And like
Yeah,
it's kind of
yeah,
like a fantasy world that they've created that they're then kind of
yeah.
making music within, which is just nuts.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And that's really that's moved through, with lots of forms of prog rock and metal to this day. Those sort
Yeah,
of,
yeah,
that fantasy vibe is still very much happening.
yeah.
And I'm definitely I definitely work with that a little bit. When I'm titling tracks and things, they often have a sort of fantastical, futuristic or sort of ancient some referencing to
Mm.
something that most people would consider like not your everyday sort of reality. They're not referencing sort of everyday subjects. They're sort of referencing distant, far out things or cosmic or like futuristic things.
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
I definitely find myself liking working in those zones, but also far out things that I do consider part of our reality that people just don't talk about too much. Do you know what I mean? So things like dreams and psychological phenomena and psychic phenomena, things that are like a little bit out of the ordinary.
Mm.
Generally, is what I'm more attracted to. I'm just that's what interests me in life.
Yeah. When I was younger, I used to really struggle with the idea of being like a kind of an artist because I've been like, well, I've got no fucking ideas. I'm just doing stuff. You know what I mean? But it's kind of
Yeah,
like recently that I've kind of realised that process just within itself because it is like kind of thoughtless sometimes. The
yeah,
the
of
way
course.
that people can make music. They're just
Yeah,
making sounds at the end of the day. I'm
yeah,
just wrapped up an album now, and it's only through arranging the tracks and, as you say, getting the title together and the order and that sort of stuff. I was like, all of a sudden, like a concept's kind of formed. It's like, oh, okay, it's about this. It's like it's taking me by surprise
that's
almost, right?
that's right. And congratulations for doing the album. That's awesome. It's always a
No,
big
thanks.
thing to sort of get happening.
Yeah,
Um, yes, I agree. I think and there's no rules with that. And I think we tend to sort of feel like, and this was actually really implanted in me quite heavily, and they were really trying to aim for this, going to art school and stuff. It's sort of like, what's your intention, and
yeah,
what's your intention with your work, and
yeah.
sort of like having a clear idea that you want to communicate, and or represent.
Mm,
It doesn't have to be just an idea. It could be a feeling whatever, but you have this idea beforehand, and then you do the piece. But like that's not how I ever worked, and I was always a bit like it just didn't make sense, and I was always sort of quite rebellious about that because I just wanted to work without having any rules or any idea that I was going to do. And then, but during that process, of course, you start to, like, even while you're working, sometimes you can start to have ideas and you can start to realize, oh, this is sort of about this, or just completely after it, like just when you're naming the piece, you're just like, oh yeah, like now I sort of, after listening to it for a while and putting it down and amongst these other tracks, I can see where it fits in, and and then when you name it, it's like it only has to be a couple of words, and that just sort of gives another layer for somebody to skip through a track, and then you've got another layer. It's just, oh, that's interesting. And I really am somebody who encourages people to sort of really not worry about trying to work out what they're doing and what it is straight away. Anyway, I think it just comes naturally over time. You start to realize what you're interested in, what you are, who you are, and what you're sort of communicating.
It paints a bit of a different picture when you go into kind of galleries. It's like a photography exhibition. It's like, oh, here's a series of photos that's exploring XYZ or whatever. And it kind of like imprints a kind of expectation of like that's how you should approach work.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's right. And that I think actually holds a lot of people back from just playing and just enjoying the process, rather than sort of thinking of it as this serious thing that you've got to do to be an artist and all of that. When actually I think everyone's kind of got an artist in them. Everyone's got a creative side. But sort of, I feel that unfortunately, a lot of sort of schooling and education sort of can kind of push that down a little bit and sort of, encourage everyone to sort of be thinking about, making money out of it, or sort of doing something for some other purpose, not for just for fun and for joy and that sort of thing. But I find that when you're actually doing it for those reasons, then some of the most meaningful stuff will come out naturally. Do you know what I mean? It just,
So you do a bit of field recording as part of your work as well. So I do some field recording occasionally as well. And what I've noticed a similarity between field recording and the way I'll kind of put tracks together. So, when you're out with a microphone, you're kind of like hunting for sound, and you capture kind of little bits and that sort of thing. And then when you go to use those field recordings in a project, you're searching through maybe 20 minutes of recording of ambiences or whatever it is. And with music, I kind of feel like it's the same way for me anyway. It's like I'll make music and I'll record like a long section of a thing, and I'm just exploring a thing, and then I'm pulling bits out of it. Like, do you feel similarly?
I definitely do that. I definitely record sometimes for as long as my camera can allow me to record, which is just 30 minutes at a time, and I'll just go back through and get 10 1-minute snippets out of that 30 minutes that I think I actually do often quite a lot more than that. I usually do sort of like a lot more than 10, and then I bring it onto my phone, and then I sort of listen to them on my phone, and then cull that down to 10. So there's a process of just bringing it down to what I feel is sort of a good little collection. I like that. I haven't sort of made that association with, but when you think about it, for sure I am sort of I'm just taking a field recording of my modular synth for like half an hour, and then there's sort of getting little sections of it.
Have you got anything on the horizon that you want to talk about that might be coming up?
I have got a few releases that I'm going to sort of start talking about it soon, but they're not at the point of release. But I've got 3 shorter albums, 25 to 30-minute albums, that one of which has been sort of in the works for many years, like 3 years or something, but it just sort of got on the back burner and forgotten about a little bit, because it was going to be released. And so that's something that I want to get out, which has got some vocals by a Canadian vocalist, who she was really great.
Oh, cool.
And then I've got an ambient album which I pretty much just recorded in one, like we've been talking about, a little section of jams that I just made one day last week, and it just and I was like, oh, this is good. I'm just gonna make an album out of these, and I've sort of put them together in the last week and a half, and feeling good about that. So that's ready,
Cool.
almost. And then I've got a vocal, it's more vocal, more sort of experimental vocal type thing. Lots of field recordings and real textural sort of stuff, more organic. And that one, again, sort of in the works. So yeah, I've got a few little things that I
Nice.
want to work, but nothing sort of
Yeah,
in
I
stone.
agree.
I'm working with a fellow from David from Mystery Schools, Mystery Circle, sorry, a label in America, and he is really helpful at sort of focusing me about what I'm sort of wanting to do, and a project that I actually want to do with him. He's been encouraging me to do is sort of actually getting all the audio from all my Instagram posts and actually just
Right.
just releasing it as this
Cool.
huge like archive,
Yeah.
and then just picking little tracks as singles sort of throughout time. So that's another little thing, and that's another little project. But yeah, you know, yeah, a few things on the go. But yeah, and how about yourself? Like, are you self-publishing, or what are you doing with your album?
I'm on there's an Italian experimental music label called SOVN, and
Yep.
I did some work with one of the guys that's like run by two people, and
Yeah.
he was just like, do you ever feel like releasing stuff? Because I just
Yeah.
I just don't do much with my music, and
Yeah.
it's like, sure,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll
Yeah.
put something together, and
Yeah.
making a few cassettes and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think
Awesome.
it's
So
my
the
first
album,
like.
you're
Sorry.
doing cassette for this one?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
No, I'm quite excited about it. I've been because I've kind of been playing with these tracks for about 2, maybe 3 years, and not really sure what to do with it. So I've kind of did what you said earlier. I've taken my stereo sessions, I've put them into Reaper, and I've just kind of like arranged
Yeah.
and layered and added extra
Yeah.
bits
Yeah.
and that sort of thing. So
Great.
yeah.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Excellent. I can't wait to hear it, because I do. I love what you've been making, and I mean, you've got some beautiful gear there as well. And I actually really like the look of your studio. It's got a beautiful setup there. Yeah, it's sort of part of it, isn't it? Sort of getting it set up in a certain way. So I appreciate that. Look forward to hearing it.
Oh, cool. Thanks, mate.
Yeah.
Well, awesome, dude. Awesome to get to know you.
No worries.
It'll be cool to chat again in the
Yeah.
future as well. Like,
Yeah. Absolutely, Michael. Yeah, that was really good. Enjoyed that.